Hello? Okay. Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. As some of you might know, I'm Stephen Benson. I'm the Communications Director at CIBJO. And this is the panel that will discuss the document, the Blue List, which we released for public consultation now, most probably about 5 months ago, in May of this year. And we're going to present it once again to the CIBJO Congress. Some of you have seen this or a similar presentation while we were going through the consultation process. The document was put together by CIBJO's Responsible Jewelry Supply Chain Nomenclature Committee. All the people sitting on the panel over here were members of the committee. There's another few members sitting in the audience. It was the committee itself began its work in about 2019. This was a long process, and was actually much larger. There was a period of time in which when every time we had a meeting, we used to do it twice so that we could catch the west coast of the United States and other parts of the world. And we essentially finished the work around about May, and since then have been in public consultation. I'll just introduce the panel, and we'll actually go from right to left. We have the two co-chairs of the panel, the one being Dr. Gaetano Cavalieri, the CIBJO president, Ferial Zarouki, who's also the co-chair, who right now is president of the World Diamond Council, and right now still is the chief trade officer at De Beers, Sarah Yud, who is the CEO and general counsel at the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, Purvi Shah, who's the lead of the committee, who is head of sustainable supply chain at De Beers, Elodie Deguzan, who is the executive director of the World Diamond Council, Raluca Angel, who is the head, I'm just trying to get you to remember your title, Raluca, head of external affairs and industry relations at the National Diamond Council, Lisa Koenigsberg, who is the president of initiatives in arts and culture, and Ken Scarrett, who wears lots of hats in CIBJO, but is a vice president. He's also head of Sector A, and also the president of the CIBJO Pearl Commission, and also dean of the CIBJO Academy. I think we've got it all in. So what we're going to do, we're just briefly going to just sort of describe what the work is that we did. Then we will run through parts of the Blue List itself, just so that you get some idea of how it was put together. And then we would like to open up the floor to you to get some more feedback. And we will also discuss the results of the public consultation. So if you give me a second, I'm just going to try to turn my... Okay, we'll start with Gaetano. The Blue List was the period that we've got to right now is the culmination of a long process, which began, like I said, more than 5 years ago. Can you explain to the audience how the whole concept of the Blue List was conceived, and how did the committee come into being?
Thank you very much. Sorry for the quick lunch, which for a number of us was even much faster. We just had a little sandwich meanwhile we were passing by. But somebody told me that it's very good for our diet. So please, from now on, don't eat anymore. Few years ago, I was on the phone with this young, nice lady, happily married to this gentleman. Behave yourself. Huh? And we were talking about a number of, let's say, free interpretation of the word using in our industry. And we were commenting the fact that it depends where you use the word in the world, the meaning was different. So we said, well, in our industry, we maybe have to take action. And in fact, we took action. And we took action starting having a limited number of meetings at the time through the Zoom or other platforms. And then we decided to put together the committee with so-called nomenclature committee, which then came to the blue list. In this committee, we have a number of people, and we have also extend the presence of really incredible experts. And I can never forget that during several of these meetings, when there was a good number of people on the line, I was on my desk with at least 12, 13 different English dictionary. My wife is English. She has been teachers for all the entire life. So at home, we have a number of English dictionaries with all open, with the same words, with different meanings. So we start discussing on that, and obviously the research was going on also on the internet, on the meaning, and then with clear interrogation. But in any case, the discussion was, as it is, so interesting with this caliber of people that is now on stage, but also for those that are not, where the discussion on every single meaning of every single word was like to be in the language academy. In Italy, there is an academy, the so-called the Academy of Crusca, where there are all these top professors that are debating the meaning of every single word and which meanings has to be given to that words. So I was feeling to be in a contest like this. Well, just to cut the long story short, you have seen today and yesterday, especially in the panel related to Diamond, about misinformation, about perception, about real meaning, about misunderstanding, sometimes even driven to be misunderstood. But the necessity is that when we talk, not only amongst us, but especially all of us toward the consumer, we have to have a number of words and the number of concepts that has to be clearly expressed and understood by the consumer to let the consumer to have a correct, conscious choice.
Thank you. Ferial, can you explain, in putting the blue list together, I mean, how did we structure it? And then how did we select the terms that were going to be discussed?
So, as Gaetano mentioned, we chose, when we noticed this discrepancy, and I'm sure many of you have experienced what I'm about to talk about, but I've sat in the audience when the trade was talking about their own definition of sustainability, and the panelists all had a different definition of sustainability, and then they'd start talking about ethical sourcing and response. It was just, for me, where English isn't my first language, it's important for me to understand what the other person is saying. So I was getting confused. But the great thing about this industry is the diversity in culture and background and languages. If we are not speaking the same language but using the same words to mean different things, how can we expect to not confuse the consumer? So when I was speaking with Gaetano that night, I asked for help from Gaetano because CIBJO is the best platform to agree on the definitions. Why? Because it's proven track record in developing nomenclature, standards, that are recognized and embedded in policy, and because it brings people together in unity from so many different backgrounds, so many different markets, so many different regions from all parts of the supply chain, and it includes all materials. So this wasn't a diamond-only initiative, because I usually work on diamond-only initiatives, but this was a all materials initiative, and a great way for many of us to learn about each other's challenges. That's why we went to CIBJO, and I thank you, Gaetano, for welcoming us, putting the idea forward to your board. The board supported it. At that point, we wanted to create the committee. So to get the right coverage, we needed people from all parts of the supply chain, from mine to retail. But we also needed people that would cover all materials. So diamonds, obviously colored gemstones, gold, metals, etc. And that's how the selection of the committee was put together. But we also needed lawyers and governance experts, and that's how we brought in JVC and RJC and others who cover all jewelry materials but have a different lens, so that we can actually have a rich conversation within the committee that would look at the challenges faced by the trade, but also existing policy, existing regulation, existing definitions, so we wouldn't recreate something that would go against the grain.
Okay, that we'll now get into the blue list itself. I just see we need the slides over here, the deck. Guys?
So while they're looking for the slides, we did a few things to share that's really important for the audience to understand. We didn't choose the words. So we did a massive data scrape on the internet to understand how the trade, the jewelry sector, was speaking to the consumer. And so the words that we focused on were words that were being used currently by the trade that we felt were confusing. Words around ethics, sustainability, responsibility, traceability, source and origin, etc. That's how the list of words was started. It wasn't picked by us. And the second thing to say is we looked at dictionaries, so English and American, Oxford and Merriam-Webster. And we looked at existing international law and standards to see if those words were defined. And so what we found for the majority was actually there was no definition. There was no clear definition, hence why the confusion and hence why people created their own meanings around it. We also knew that, although it hasn't happened, and I'm sure Sarah will speak about this, regulation was coming our way, and specifically from a consumer protection perspective. So the FTC was supposed to open up its green guides and create guidelines around, terms that could be used when communicating with the consumer. So we wanted to be proactive, not reactive, agree on a clear framework as trade, take this to consumer for consumer focus groups, pull together this package and submit it to the FTC when it was the time to. So the decisions wouldn't be made for us, but one we would try to influence.
Okay, Raluca. Okay, the terms responsible, ethical, and sustainable have been used interchangeably in the trade. And the committee tried to establish clear understandings as to what each one meant. Look, it's all up on the screen over here, but can you explain to us how we came to a decision?
Absolutely, and something that Ferial highlighted earlier is the fact that legislation indeed does not define these terms, and that's a detail that is very important and very often looked around and not completely understood. Legislation, whether it's from the European Union, whether you have the US thinking about it and beyond, tackles various smaller aspects, but they don't tackle the concept of sustainability per se. So looking at this as a building block, as you can see there, is a very important way to help organizations figure out where is it that they are on the roadmap at each and every point, and then afterwards know and understand which of the elements they have to fulfill in order to be able to use certain terms. So the terms that we landed on, and indeed there was an entire area of consultation that has taken well beyond a year, we've landed on these three terms. I'll start by responsible. The responsible is the most important basis. It's the basis that we all need, and that's basically making sure that you meet the international standards, whichever they are, and also national standards, whatever they apply, and the legislation where your company resides is what you need to respect. And that as a baseline is very important. So we consider all the organizations that meet that as being able to use the terms and abiding by the concept of responsibility. Moving on to the second level, that's ethical. Ethical, we've tried to have it much more focused. Ethical is generally a concept that is quite subjective, and that can't be as such, so there is a lot of guideline behind it. But what we wanted to put forward in this aspect is the fact that we want ethical to be connected a lot to the social responsibilities that are added to meeting the international baseline requirements. So it's an extra step from the basic elements, though important, of the international standards. Now the top of the pyramid is the term sustainability. Sustainability is a general term, so for us that was, I think, one of the biggest challenges to actually have it anchored in concrete actions. And those concrete actions are the full integration of socio-economic benefits driving within the way a business operates, looking at environmental stewardship and protection, and longevity. By longevity is ensuring a lot of the economic growth on the long term for the environment and communities where that organization resides in. So these blocks need to be seen as one building on top of the other. And of course, you are going to be a sustainable organization and also incorporate elements of responsibility and ethics, which is why it resides at the top.
Yeah, so what essentially saying is that there's a hierarchy. A company can't claim to be sustainable if it doesn't meet the conditions of being both ethical and responsible. Okay, another three terms over here which are used interchangeably, and this time we'll turn to Elodie. In the same way, the terms provenance, source, and origin are often used and interchanged with one another. And again, we came and defined sort of clear meanings for each one of these three terms. Do you want to take us through that, Elodie,
Yes,
please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And just like Raluca explained for the three previous terms, where one after the other, they would build on each other, those three are actually linked in a slightly different way. So the origin, which is quite a very loaded term that you've heard many times, we refer it as the where. It anchors a gemstone, a diamond, in a place. This is the origin where it was extracted. So it can mean a mine, a region, a country. Now, the source is more focused on the method that was actually recovered or extracted. This is the how. And this is where you can actually get your context. Was, for example, the diamond artisanally mined? Was the diamond industrially extracted? We're thinking about large-scale mining. Or, and Sarah, maybe you might not be okay with me, was it reintroduced as recycled, if I may say so? And finally, provenance. And what I like about provenance and what Ferial touched upon before is that we are not all English native. Provenance in French is slightly different, in my opinion. Here, as provenance, we refer to the combination of the two previous dimensions, the where, the how, but also the who. And we're thinking about corporate ownership. We're thinking about corporate responsibility, due diligence. So provenance is actually the journey and the story we should be able to tell our consumer. what I really appreciate about the work that this committee has been doing is that, in a world where everything can be claimed, words actually need to carry weight. And this is what we've been trying to achieve. And also, let's bear in mind that clarity in words means clarity in principle.
We're getting a little bit deeper into the woods over here. One of the things that we sort of discovered through conversation over here was the element of association that is influenced culturally. In other words, something might mean something in one country and something slightly different in another. And the one of the terms that in the end generated a huge amount of discussion was the word grandfather, and particularly because of the weight that word carries in the United States, that most of us on the panel who weren't American were not aware of. Sarah, as an American and as a lawyer.
Sure. Well, I'd also like to say that I don't think that many Americans even know the origin of this term, but to explain why I don't like to use it, the term grandfathered in the U.S. originates from a legacy where people of color were not allowed the right to vote. And although by law they could vote, there were lots of restrictions put on their ability to vote. And one of them was that there was a reading and writing test that you had to take in order to be able to vote in the United States. And you would be exempt from that test if your grandfather had the right to vote. So essentially, if you were white and your grandfather had been able to vote, you would be eligible to vote. But if you were a black person or another person of color and your grandfather had not been eligible, you were not eligible to vote. And so that, hence the terminology getting grandfathered in, that's the origin of the term. And so we, of course, in the trade use this in a very different context when we're talking about legacy materials. But I thought it was important to acknowledge the racist history of the terminology in the United States and to offer an alternative. So we are using these terms interchangeably, grandfathered and legacy material, to discuss material which existed in the supply chain prior to a certain legal or trade-related rule, when trade in that material is exempt from the new requirement. So of course we use this in the context of the Russian import restrictions, that there's material or that existed from Russia from before the war that is legacy material that should be allowed in. Lots of countries are using the term grandfathered because that is the term that is familiar to them. I strongly encourage folks to use legacy when possible.
Lisa, we could talk actually two terms over here that with vintage and antique. As you'll see over here, not all the terminology that we use had to do with ethics, responsibility, or sustainability, but we were also looking at words which are used in some type of historical context when describing jewelry. And the two that, again, are often confused, we felt was vintage and antique. Would you like to talk us through that, please, Lisa?
Sure. Is this thing working?
Yeah.
Okay. So the two that were identified by the committee are vintage and antique, with vintage meaning a piece of jewelry that was made between 30 and 100 years ago. So, for example, Art Deco, which is just marking its 100th anniversary this year, you'd have to have a pretty early example for it to qualify. Antique, according to the terms that were created or articulated, would be a better way of phrasing it, by the committee, is a piece or set of jewelry that was made at least 100 years ago. And there are not styles associated with that in the definition, but there are an abundance of them. So one of the things I would say is that, as somebody who looks at visual culture from a historical point of view, amongst other things, there could be amplification of these terms, but certainly they serve their purpose.
And I'll just quickly add to that that definition actually does align with a U.S. definition that Fish and Wildlife has about antique. So oddly enough, the Fish and Wildlife, yes, they have an entire antique designation for animal materials, and it is aligned with that definition.
So that would mean that ivory was aligned?
Yes.
Okay, we're getting to the term over here that. Pardon? I do. Sorry. Sure. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go back. Another term over here that actually generated discussion was the word recycled, in part because of largely because of the way the word sounded over here. People sort of saw recycling as something associated with the garbage you throw out in the house. Obviously, in the industry, it has other meaning. Purvi, would you like to talk us through this one?
Yeah, I thought it's just good to raise this point as well with the audience here today. So we firstly focused on looking at any recycled gemstones, pearls, diamonds. We excluded the definition of recycled metal, including recycled gold, because at the time there was many other conversations going on through multi-stakeholder initiatives, and we did not need to add more complexity. So that definition is explicitly out of the scope of the blue list, but will be added in the future because CIBJO have a clear position on the definition. But the work that we were doing was focused on gemstones and diamonds and pearls, and we were very explicit that definition is focused around a product that had a prior use by a consumer before, and has then re-entered the value chain to be reprocessed in some way, such as recut, repolished, or just simply resold. And we thought it's very important to be very clear that we have presented quite a clear line in the sand there as with a post-consumer definition. And we've been clear that any product that may have existed as inventory but then is maybe taken out and reset would not be classified as recycled, and that would just be deemed as old or existing inventory or stock.
Thank you. The terminology that most probably caused the most anxiety, I think, during the public review had to do with tracing terminology, and terms like chain of accountability, chain of custody, and traceability. So for that purpose, I think Ferial is definitely the most qualified person to address this.
So traceability terms are very confusing, and I think we touched on it in the panel with Avi yesterday, where one of the panelists was saying, lots of people out there claim traceability, but when you scratch below the surface, it's not traceability. And we found the same when we were doing our research. So we looked at words that were currently being used. So we've got standards around chain of custody, because that's the term in the trade. It's a very B2B term. It's a policy term. And then there is chain of accountability. And so chain of custody is the tracking of the movement of the product through paper-based solutions most of the time. But it's about understanding the movement of the product. And chain of accountability is less so the specific product, but it's the players in the supply chain. So it's, whose hands is the product going through. And you need to know both to be able to claim traceability. Now, what we've done is we've taken chain of accountability, so that's the green area. Some people know their supply chain, they do due diligence on their supply chain. Actually, most people do, all people do, because it is a requirement for pricey products. And others do chain of custody because they want to get a certificate. But neither on their own means traceability. You do need to know both to claim traceability of your product.
Right, meaning that a blockchain by itself would not provide you with traceability. It would provide you with a chain of custody.
No, so I mentioned that yesterday. Blockchain is just a tool. It's a ledger, And whatever you put into that blockchain, you can't change. So you can put in whatever you want. You can put in a self-disclosure that becomes true forever. It doesn't make it true, right? But if you do have a claim on traceability that focuses on chain of accountability and chain of custody, and you put that on a blockchain, then that blockchain provides you immutable traceability. Traceability does not equal blockchain either, right? So we didn't claim here that anything needs to be on blockchain for you to claim traceability. We just said that the processes and the management systems need to be in place to track your product and the people in your supply chain so that you do diligence on the people that you're trading with.
Okay. There were also, in addition to talking about terms that are used over here, there were certainly terms that we discourage that they be either should be avoided or not be used at all. Sarah, do you want to talk about some of these?
This is my favorite part, because I love telling people what not to do. But in particular, these terms are used very frequently in the jewelry industry without clear definitions and with meanings that really just don't apply to these products. So saying that a jewelry product is eco-friendly or environmentally friendly is such a broad claim that it really is meaningless unless you specify what exactly you're talking about. And so this actually comes from the Federal Trade Commission's Green Guides. Their 2012 edition specifically says this: if you should not be making a generalized environmental claim without data to back up that claim. And it's really hard to do that in such a broad term. So they caution not to use that terminology. The term biodegradable we've seen, it's not really applicable to the precious jewelry industry. Green and greener jewelry material, again, much like the term eco-friendly, it is so broad and difficult to substantiate. And when you do use that terminology, studies have shown that consumers ascribe a lot of benefit to those terms. They think they're really meaningful when you use them. So if it actually doesn't mean anything, you're deceiving the customer. And then finally, energy efficient and energy smart. Again, the terms are difficult to substantiate. It's difficult. It's hard to understand what you're comparing that to. And I'll take the opportunity to note that, as Fariel alluded to, the Federal Trade Commission was looking at the Green Guides, the 2012 Green Guides. They opened a full review. Unfortunately, that process appears to be stalled. The change in the U.S. administration means that the 3 current Federal Trade Commission commissioners are prioritizing other areas for review, and it doesn't look like they're spending too much time on that. So we don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We do still have these 2012 guides, and they're not bad. They just don't cover everything we'd like them to, but it does still say things like you should not make these broad environmental claims without specification and data to back that up.
Yeah, sure.
We spoke actually yesterday about EU legislation. So actually for all of you that work on the EU market, you actually have laws that in this moment ask you not to use these terms. So a lot of companies also within the US, for example, that will need to either purchase or sell on EU market, will need to abide by these laws. So perhaps that helps sort of set the level playing field. And one element, especially on the first point, even if you would make a claim and then you have things to prove that claim, you need to be very specific whether that claim or that term applies to your entire business, to your entire product, or just parts of it. Otherwise, if you're making it broad and you're just, let's say, eco-friendly, or you use renewable sources of energy on a specific part of your production process or your activity, you need to state exactly what it is, because Sarah was spot on there. Consumers attach a lot of meaning behind all of these words. They would expect a lot of that. So both marketing codes as well as EU green codes and global marketing codes, I would say, they ask you not to generalize data that much. So be specific.
Ken. We're going to the sector of the industry over here that most probably we had the most pushback during the consultation process was color gemstones, which didn't surprise us specifically because they are in a special situation, and led us also to place a disclaimer within the document itself. Ken's not a color gemstone trader, but he's close to the color gemstone industry, and definitely well qualified to talk us through this part of the process.
Thank you, Stephen. I think, as I said before, I don't regard what's in the document as a disclaimer in terms of the word. I regard what's in the document is maybe an explanation of the situation with colored stones. Before I get into that, I want to say that I don't think there's anybody under the umbrella of the Sector A grouping that doesn't support the definitions that have been produced and find them warming. And hopefully one day, as we learn how to use them in our daily life, the colorstone industry can adopt them and be open. The problem is, I'm sorry, it's continuous. The problem is the colorstone industry is very fragmented. To have, let me use the word traceability, in the colorstone industry, I'm not going to say it's impossible. There are big mining companies, such as Gemfields, for example, where you can get some traceability of your colored gemstones. But they amount to a tiny, tiny percentage of the material, colorstone material coming on the market. The vast majority, greater than 90%, 99% of the material coming onto the market is coming onto the market through a myriad of small-scale miners across a myriad of countries. So whether that is in Brazil, whether that's in various parts of Africa, Madagascar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, the scenario is the same. Getting traceability on that is a nightmare. As I've said before, a lot of that material ends up in single marketing centers. One single marketing center, which is close to me, is in Chanthaburi, in Thailand. There, you will find all the material from Madagascar, from Africa, from Brazil, from everywhere. And when the material comes there, in this small town in the southeast of Thailand, all the material is mixed up. They don't care. It is mixed up because they want to, they sort it according to color, the clarity, and so on, that meets the requirements of the dealers that come to that town every single weekend of every year. Friday, Saturday, it's full of dealers, and those dealers have specific requirements. So before those dealers come there, the people with all the material will mix it all up to allow for their clients' requirements of color, clarity, size, etc. So there are situations where certain gemstones will require, in order to get a better price, will require origin reporting from gem labs across the world. And in those circumstances, people buy them, they go and they they get origin reports, but that's nowhere near the traceability situation that we're talking about here. I think with the case of diamond and so on, I think it's a much easier scenario. I also think it's a much easier scenario in terms of pearl. You know, much easier scenario. But I don't know how I end up being the negativity on this, this grouping. I apologize. I'm just trying to give the picture, so that we to have people understand that we as our Sector A grouping are very supportive of what is being done. We just want you. we just want you to know, and to maybe give us a break, you know, going forward, so that we're not pilloried unnecessarily. So, thank you.
Can I jump in here and just say, I don't think that you're being negative. I think that you're being explicative or explanatory. And truth takes time, as they said in Alias, which is a great espionage show. But it does, and it doesn't seem to me that what you're saying is negative at all.
Absolutely. Okay. If I can also jump into that. I believe that as a member of this committee, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you personally, Ken. So thank you. And I think that based on your input representing the colored gemstones industry, we tried to do our best to see how we can bring clarity without paralyzing the trade. It is important to enable aggregation. It is important to enable the development of the markets where colored gemstones are growing. And we tried to find a way to create traceability terms that would match as many products as possible. So, for example, what you describe in the colored gemstones area, we find in the small sizes and diamonds, in the melee. Everyone wants traceability. In melee, I say, why? What's your purpose? I mean, from a diamond perspective, there's no big surprise where these diamonds come from. There's only 8 producers. But anyways, they want traceability. So we're trying to understand, because it's so difficult in that size range. It's not easy. If I look at gold, gold claims traceability. And sometimes I see it being rated as better than diamonds on the traceability radar because of this thing called, I'm going to get it wrong, mass balance, I think it's what it's called. I looked into it and I was really surprised to understand that mass balance mechanism and how applauded it is, because it is one that enables aggregation, right? So as I think about melee and I think about mass balance, I come back to colored gemstones because I learn from you every time that you speak. And I think, does mass balance and our traceability terms and aggregation in the colored gemstones, do they still fit in with these definitions? My personal view, although I'm not a lawyer, is yes. So we're not saying that it needs to be stone by stone traced. We're saying understand where your product comes from, so it can be in batches, etc. We're not saying origin, like you need to give me the origin of each stone. So you can, as mass balance basically gives you a estimate percentage of different locations being melted into one nice big lingot. Now I know the French word and not the English one. And you just need to know the players in your supply chain. So does that work? God knows, I don't know, but it's a way to sort of, and that's why we're doing the consultation. It's a way to say, does this work? Does this help formalize? Does this enable people in the supply chain to provide more information, we need to start somewhere, and it always is a journey of continuous improvement. What we need to know is, does this paralyze you? If it paralyzes you, then we need to rethink.
Okay, we've got a clock clicking down over here, which I keep on looking at. We now come to Purvi. Purvi was the lead of the committee, and also was essentially responsible for managing the feedback that came in during the public consultation. So we'd like to turn to that and give you some idea of what we learned, because that sort of had an impact on what we've decided to do moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So the feedback, the consultation period ran for about 5 months, and it was a solid duration of time. It required, we had a feedback form that was based on questions, so we got some really granular feedback, and we've also been doing a bit of a roadshow and having the opportunity to come, and various members of the committee have been attending various events and being able to speak to people, run similar presentations as we've done today, and we have received a substantial amount of rich feedback, I'm sure from many of you today in this audience as well, so thank you so much for it. We truly believe that, and to what Ferial was saying, Ken was saying, that we really need to understand how this is landing, how practical it is. We need to start somewhere, and we were really curious to see how it's landed. We've had feedback from across the globe, predominantly Asia, Europe, and North America, but with also input from Africa, Australia, and Latin America too. So we did achieve the global reach that CIBJO has, which was great. We had input from across all sectors of the industry: pearls, diamonds, metals, colored gemstones, and across the value chain. So that was really great representation in the feedback. And then just share some high-level points. I could talk for much longer, but I will keep it succinct. On the whole, most people generally were aligned with the thinking around most of what was contained within the definitions and what we were proposing. However, we have received a lot of rich feedback in terms of examples and some really important nuances that we need to look at. And we also did receive constructive criticism, of course. To give some color to that, on well, just maybe opposing views, and interesting to see them coming through. We have debated many of the points as well as a committee, and it landed somewhere. As Ferial said, we need to start somewhere and continue to improve and evolve. The term that we had on origin that Elodie spoke to, we understand that it may not fit perfectly from a pearl perspective, so we are spending some time with the experts to get that right. Sustainable is a really interesting term, and as Raluca pointed out, we debated it a lot, and the feedback also was on the spectrum. There were those that felt that the term is far too stringent as we've put it forward, and there's others who've said it is far too easy and you've been too flexible. So we've received opposing feedback, which we're now trying to really deeply unpack. We've received additional legal advice. We've been keeping a radar on the legislative landscape. Sarah and Raluca spoke to as well. In the UK in particular, things are moving quite quickly. We need to really check that term in particular. I think it's the most controversial one, most challenging one. We had good feedback in terms of recycled definition. There were some points around why do you use that term. To what Steve was saying earlier, recycled implies that something would therefore go into the waste stream, and could you propose alternatives, which I thought was interesting. It was a point we have debated in the committee, so we need to look at that in a little bit more detail, because that was clearly what we've heard back from the people that have participated. We've interestingly had feedback from people saying you shouldn't use the word ethically sourced, and suggestions for us to include words, include definitions of things like conflict-free. So we have had really excellent feedback. I think our view is that has been rich and will continue to strengthen the blue list. Thank you.
Right, I think we were actually quite brave at some stage that we even tackled the word sustainable, because I think the idea was that it's a term that's used so often, then there isn't any real clear definition of what it is, and we try to come to one. Essentially, the idea had been was that we were going to complete the process and actually bring this document for approval at this CIBJO Congress, and that as we sort of got to the end of the process, it became apparent that was going to be difficult. So I'm going to throw the line back over here. We're now in the last 10 seconds we're supposed to have of the discussion over here to Gaetano and Feriel, and maybe relate to where things go from here.
Well, as I said in my remarks yesterday, when I was mentioning what CIBJO is, what CIBJO does, this is one of the many things across the entire chain of custody, so from mine to retail, and in every single section, what CIBJO is doing, apart all the other table that we are part of, and obviously I refer to RJC, to WDC, to Watch and Jury Initiative, to ISO, to Global Compact, to WTO, to the UN, and so and so and so. So we do many things. Even though we are not 300 people working on that, we are a very limited number of people. But still we do, because we all feel compelled to do it for the benefit of the industry and the benefit of those that will follow us in this industry. We all have children. For a number of us, and I'm referring to myself, also grandchildren, I think that is our full responsibility to prepare their future in the best possible way. We cannot guarantee what will happen because the things in the world are changing every day, overnight, to a speed that never was so fast. Still, we are voluntarily here. Has never been a medical prescription, so we have to comply with what we are committed to do. If the people, and I'm referring to me, simply doesn't want to do, well, there are so many other nice things to do instead to do what we are doing. You know, we can walk in Champs-Élysées instead to be here. But on the other end, we go on stage and we call on responsibility. We call on honesty. We call on sustainability. We call on so many things, and then we ask for support, because this is logic. And when we ask for support simply because we need support. None of us is, and again I refer to me, is touched by God, even though I see the Pope every year in a private meeting, but that is another story. And I have to say that what is giving to me is strength, is feeling every day more committed to what we do, and feeling what I feel committed to the industry. And my case maybe is a different case because my family is in this business since more than 200 years. My son, that must be here somewhere, is the generation number 8, despite he is a lawyer, but nobody's perfect. With all the due respect for the lawyer. But apart that, yes, we have to do that because we love this industry. As I said yesterday, this is a wonderful industry, and there is a wonderful people. A number of these wonderful people is here today. And thank you for being, all of you, so wonderful to help and support. And I apologize for those who want to talk to me, and unfortunately I had to run here and there, but I am always ready to talk to everybody. So I want to express to this panel and to those that are part of this committee, and to those that, even though are not part, my sincere thanks. And I feel privileged to be part of this industry, of this panel, and trying to give, even if is super small, my little contribution to the panel, to CIBJO, and to the industry.
Thank you so much. I feel really uncomfortable speaking after that, Gaetano. That was really beautiful.
Co-chair.
I'll talk about the technical aspect, which is because of the breadth and width of the feedback that we've received. As Gaetano mentioned, we were actually going to use this Congress to launch version number 1 of the Blue List. But actually, we have received so much feedback, and we need to do some more work, and to the points that Ken raised and others have raised, to really think about the areas that make sense where we need to change. Of course, there's a whole bunch of feedback, like, you know, we shouldn't use the word ethical. We can't really take that on board because it's being used. As I mentioned, we don't choose the words. We're just trying to create clarity to, around the word, or guidance around when to use that word. And I agree, it's a very tough word, for example, because ethics is all about morality, and who has the right, moral right here, my lens or your lens. It's very complicated. But we're trying to do our best, so bear with us. We are working towards the launch of version 1. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take, but it will be in 2026, probably in Q1, or we'll try and find a CIBJO event to link it with. So please give us some more time, because we don't need this to be perfect, but we need this to be measurable and credible for at least the first version. Thank you.
I think, unfortunately, I don't think, because there's a panel that is coming us immediately after us. In fact, they should have already started about 8 minutes ago, so it's going to cut into your coming coffee break. But thank you very much, and I think the AI panel can step forward. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.